All right. Well, I'm about as ready as I'll ever be. Yeah, looks like I've been eating my lipstick off. It's okay. We'll put the mic right in front of my mouth. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. Hello, babies, and welcome back to D-Talk, your safe space to explore your creativity, expand your critical thinking skills, embrace your cringe, and prime yourself for connection. I'm your host, David, and I would like to welcome you to this very special episode. I'm so happy that I'm still here filming and recording these podcasts, so if you've been interacting with my content on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, what's the other one? Spotify. I just want to say thank you so much for supporting me because honestly, I am really having the best time bringing this content to you on a regular basis. Now, if you're listening on Spotify, you don't know this, but if you're watching me on YouTube, you will see that I have been painted purple. We're painted perps today, and I've accessorized. I've got a purple wig. You know, we have the whole thing here together. If you're interested in seeing how I painted this beautiful purple face here, head on over to my YouTube channel because I definitely have a video of me painting myself in this purple nonsense. So if you're interested in makeup content, head on over to my YouTube channel and watch that video if that's something that interests you. So that might make sense too if you have noted the title of this episode, which is of course being high maintenance. So today I'm so excited to get into this topic and this idea of being high maintenance because I thought it was especially appropriate to do something very high maintenance before I filmed this episode here. So I'm so excited that you're here. It's going to be a great episode, but let's get into the art of being high maintenance. So babies, when you think about being high maintenance, I really wonder, and let me know in the comment section of wherever you're watching this, is being high maintenance a bad thing to you? Is this idea of being a high maintenance person something that you would be ashamed of or being embarrassed of, right? There's two really different ways that we can look at this idea of high maintenance because I think a lot of our culture perpetuates this idea that being a high maintenance person is shameful, to be honest. So before we get into this idea of whether high maintenance is something that you should be proud of or something that you should be ashamed of, let's start with a few definitions here. Now, where else do we begin other than the Urban Dictionary, babes? So if you look up high maintenance on Urban Dictionary, it says, number one, someone requiring a lot of work and attention to maintain. Number two says requiring a lot of money or attention to appearance. Number three says requiring a high emotional investment or an excessive amount of money. As now we've talked about money twice now. That might be building the lore here of one of these perspectives. So an example of a high maintenance behavior, according to Urban Dictionary, would be having frequent professional cosmetic consultations such as hairdressing, manicures, and pedicures. What kind of person do you think wrote this Urban Dictionary entry? The next one says excessive worthless spending, and then in brackets it says tricking. I don't know what tricking means in this context. I wonder if that means like turning tricks, but I don't think that's what that means. Worthless spending, okay? And then the next one says attention craving, okay? And then the final one says being too delicate or suave. I didn't know that being suave was associated with being high maintenance. Because if you think of somebody that's suave, you think of like, I don't know, good-mannered, maybe like charismatic, that kind of thing. I guess you could associate this idea of somebody who is charismatic as somebody who is high maintenance, but even I don't think that's the case usually. There's a footnote down in the, oh God, okay. There's a footnote at the bottom here that says, note, high maintenance is primarily used to refer to attractive straight women and or a person or people that's stuck on self. So this was written in 2006. So this is obviously, I was going to say it's an outdated idea of being high maintenance, but I don't think this was ever supremely accurate. So there's this idea, right, that I don't want to say, like, we usually don't talk in terms of the binary here with all of my content, but I think we can talk in terms of femininity because I think in a lot of these cases, femininity is something that is seen or can be seen or kind of grouped together with this idea of being high maintenance, right? It's really interesting that this person wrote an attractive straight woman. Like, what about an ugly gay woman? Can't she be anyway? Like, I don't want to exclude anybody. I think anybody can be high maintenance. This whole Urban Dictionary is giving incel vibes, which is not surprising. So do you define yourself as somebody who is high maintenance? Like, I want you to think about it right now. Take a moment and think. Am I a high maintenance person? And if the answer is yes, are you proud of that fact? Or is that something maybe that you wouldn't share with other people? I think this is a really interesting topic because it's not necessarily like it's so completely subjective as well. Like if we think of this idea of like the contrasting ideas of femininity and masculinity, like the masculine energy that's using like a 7-in-1 shampoo, conditioner, body wash, toothpaste, all of that, like that can be seen as really low maintenance. So then I have a shampoo and a conditioner, so that would be seen as high maintenance. But me compared to somebody who has like a 7-step hair care routine, they would be seen as high maintenance. So is this idea of being high maintenance, does it imply that you are passing a judgment on this person, right? Because in order to define something as being high maintenance, you have to be coming from a standard that is inherently lower maintenance than the person that you're comparing to. So if anybody calls you high maintenance, that might just be in the comparison to them. And if they are extremely low maintenance, you get what I'm saying here? Like it is quite a continuum, and it's probably hard to define where you land on that continuum because everything is different. Like you could be high maintenance in one aspect of your life and low maintenance in the other aspect of your life. So it's really hard to define or label one person with this notion of being high maintenance because we all have these different areas in our lives that require different maintenance. Maintenance. There's really, yeah, when you go into Google and type in being high maintenance, that is on Reddit, there's a thread called "What do you mean when you say a female?" Red flag. Red flag right away when somebody says female. Not in terms of like just female, but if you're it is within my experience that when somebody says female, it's usually in a derogatory sense, or I don't know what it is. I don't know. Maybe I've watched too many alpha male podcasts. Well, not really. I'm not watching them, like not in an earnest way. I watch that because sometimes I like to cringe watch things, which probably isn't good for my algorithm. But I also have a series on YouTube called Dismantling Hate, where I react to all kinds of hateful things out in the world. And unfortunately, there's no shortage of these things to be found. So I look at alt-right content, like I clean my guns with liberal tears, and anti-vax content and anti-women content and racism and homophobia and transphobia and fatphobia. I've spent a lot of time looking at these hateful things. When the word female comes out, it's usually a red flag. So anyway, okay, so it says, what do you mean when you say a female is high maintenance? So let's just start from the top. Let's see what these Reddit users think being high maintenance means. First one. Last night, I received a phone call at 2:35 a.m. It was an acquaintance I met 2 years ago. She's a 2-hour drive away in another city and wants me to pay for her cab ride home. Looking up her location on a map, she's at a bar a block from the night bus stop. I was awake for more than an hour before I get a text saying she's home. As hot as she is, ain't worth the drama to pursue that. Yeah, so this is, again, like, I don't want to keep using this label of like incel. And if you don't know what that means, that's the shortened version of the phrase involuntarily celibate. There's a whole culture of people who are incels. It's honestly fascinating in the worst way to watch online. So if you like cringe watching things or maybe learning more about the human condition, the culture of incels and the ideology that exists in there is fascinating to me, at least. But it might be, if it's a little bit too close to home for you, I understand why you wouldn't want to engage in any of that content, because it's hard to watch. The next example says, somebody who is very demanding, somebody who expects everyone else to do everything for them, complains a lot. 10 out of 10 for looks, but 1 out of 10 personality. Although I have met high maintenance women that couldn't get a man to begin with. Shouldn't play hard to get when you're already hard to want. Yikes. So this is that idea of like, you can only be high maintenance. You can only be high maintenance if you are an attractive person, which is such a, that's not something I was expecting to find in this conversation about being a high maintenance person. But I think if we look at the ways in which people view femininity and masculinity, this idea of being a high maintenance feminine person is relying on other people to maintain you. And this is a really important part of this conversation. This is my personal view now, is that if you are a high maintenance person, it doesn't matter if you're the one maintaining it. You know what I mean? Like, I think high maintenance could be seen as a bad thing if you're expecting everybody else around you to maintain you. And I don't think that's healthy. I don't think that's appropriate, but I think maybe that's the confusion or the distance that I'm having between my idea of high maintenance and these Reddit users, right? And I think these Reddit users are an example of a lot of people that exist out in our world thinking like, you can only be a high maintenance person if you are an attractive person, because then your partner is going to be motivated to maintain you because of your looks, which implies an unhealthy relationship to begin with, right? Like, you shouldn't be only interested in doing something for somebody because you're attracted to them. Like, the true true mark of you as a human being is how you interact with people who can do nothing for you, right? So like, it doesn't matter if somebody, to me at least, it doesn't matter if somebody's attractive or unattractive. I don't want to be any more or less willing to do something for somebody based off of their perceived idea of attractiveness, because even that is so subjective. Like, you sit down with your friends and start swiping through Tinder, everybody starts getting in a fist fight. Like, everybody thinks something else is attractive, right? So, okay, let's continue down the line of this Reddit thread. High maintenance can mean anything from materialistic beyond the scope of what their partner is comfortable with, emotionally needy beyond what their partner is willing to provide, or it could be anything else which is viewed in an excessive light. Again, this is all very subjective. Again, this is the idea of somebody else in your life, somebody outside of you is maintaining you. This is where a lot of that hateful culture around being a high maintenance person comes from, I believe. The next one is quite simple and short. It says, she requires all of my time and attention. The next one says, there's never peace. The next one says, she requires more than your average woman to be happy. Oh no, and then there's a comment under this one that says, my Toyota, I'm going to do an accent because this is how I picture this person writing this. My Toyota can drive 300,000 kilometers on oil changes and regular maintenance. She's a trusty workhorse. Now a Ferrari, you can't go 10,000 K without an engine rebuild, cam belt change, specialized parts for brakes, etc. Expense, time, unreliability. But she's fast and eye-catching and high maintenance. Okay, now we're getting somewhere, because if yes, it takes a lot more time, maintenance, energy, and money to maintain a Ferrari than it is to maintain a Toyota Camry. I'm trying super hard to be as respectful as I can, because you know what? There's nothing wrong with being a low maintenance person. If you feel a low maintenance lifestyle deep within your soul, I think that's great. I think that's great. I think you should do it. I think you should live your life in the way that you feel most comfortable. I can't necessarily identify with being a low maintenance person. As you can tell, I'm literally sat here painted purple. This idea of like, okay, well, do you want the Toyota Camry? Oh, they didn't say Camry. I said Camry, but I'm picturing it being a Camry. Do you want the Toyota Camry or do you want the Ferrari? Are you willing to accept the differences between those two things? Will you be as happy with the Ferrari as you will the Toyota Camry? Will you be willing to put in the time, effort, and maintenance in the Ferrari in order to have that be a part of your human experience? Like, all of this is so personal and subjective, because there will be people who are very happy with the Toyota Camry, which I think is great, like I said before, but there are people that would be happier with the Ferrari. And I think if that's within your means to do, if it's sustainable, if it's ethical, I think you should drive whatever you want. And of course, this example of the cars is just that. It's an example, right? If we think of like me waking up and doing a basic makeup look, actually, no, that's probably still high maintenance. If we think of me waking up this morning and just like throwing on the clothes that I had on yesterday and sitting down and recording this podcast about being high maintenance without any makeup in that, like, would I be as happy with that presentation of myself with that level of maintenance? I think I would be happy, but I think maybe we can go a little bit beyond this idea of happy and like what fuels me? What deep down in my soul makes me feel fulfilled? That's right, I'm throwing the F word around. We're talking about feeling fulfilled here, because you may not be as fulfilled driving the Toyota Camry as you would the Ferrari. It's not a great example because there are, of course, the monetary limitations of being able to drive a Ferrari versus a Toyota Camry. Of course, when you get down to the brass tacks of it all, I think being high maintenance does not have to imply that you have a lot of money in the ways that is mentioned here in these Reddit posts. Is it easier to be a high maintenance person when you have a lot of money? Yeah, I think that's definitely an important note here, but I think you can have a level of high maintenance without having a lot of money as well. And of course, there's going to be limitations, because sometimes this idea of being a high maintenance person is like getting your nails done and going out for pedicures. That's the same thing twice. Is like this idea of like, you need the fancy things and you need like expensive cars, you need expensive jewelry, you need like fancy meals and expensive makeup and all of this. But what is it that we're actually maintaining, right? That's where we're going here, but we're going to get into that here in just a moment. I'm just having a great time going through this Reddit thread. Let's see. Oh, the next one looks like it's gender inclusive, so we love that here on DTalk. Being high maintenance for any gender really means that your happiness is contingent on everyone else's behavior and never your own. This kind of person usually demands that people meet them on their level, which is a constant state of discontentment. Misery loves company comes to mind. Wow. And this idea is pretty consistent with some of the literature that I have consulted before sitting down here to film this podcast, is that a lot of people think this idea of being high maintenance means that your sense of self, your sense of confidence, comes from people outside of yourself. And to be honest, I think that's almost a completely unrelated issue, because if you need to derive your sense of being or your sense of self-confidence from the people that are around you, I don't necessarily know if that implies whether you are high maintenance or not. Do you know people in your life that live a high maintenance lifestyle, but also don't derive their sense of self-confidence from the people around them? I do. And the same goes for the opposite. Like, I know people who are very low maintenance who require a lot of time and attention from others in order to feel good about themselves. This isn't a comment on whether that is good or bad, but I think the research shows that one of these things is sustainable and leads to an overall greater sense of happiness, right? If you can't manage your own healthy levels of self-esteem without resorting to outside factors, I think that's a different conversation to be had other than your maintenance. But I guess it could be connected though, because if you don't feel so good about yourself, it would be easy to like go out shopping lots and get those dopamine hits. Or like, if you don't have a healthy body image, maybe putting on thousands of dollars of designer clothes would help you feel better about the presentation of your body. Like, there would be those connections there, which I think is an important note here. But again, I don't think that's mutually exclusive with this idea of being high maintenance. She taxes her partner for more energy and resources than the expected standard girlfriend level. Again, this is all seemingly coming from the side of the masculine perspective, and we're definitely going to get more of a feminine perspective here coming up. I mean, you're listening and or watching me, which is definitely the feminine perspective to some extent. You know, like to quote Trixie Mattel, "No, I feel male always." I mean, I even feel male now. Do I look male? And then Larry King goes, "No." Anyway, I'm basically in full drag, but like RuPaul, I'm wearing sweatpants behind this desk. Again, this idea of like then the expected standard. So it's comparing your level of maintenance and required energy to this some kind of set standard of the rest of the world, right? It's all within this idea of comparison, right? Like, you are more high maintenance than my ex-girlfriend, or like, you are more high maintenance than the rest of the women out there in the world. And I don't think it's necessarily healthy to be comparing yourselves to groups of other people, or rather, I'm always thinking about the intention or the motivation behind people comparing one person to their perceived ideation of the rest of the world, right? Like, okay, so if I have a girlfriend and she's very high maintenance, what is the point of comparing her to the other women that I have in my life that I perceive to be less high maintenance, right? Why would I be saying that out loud? And if you bring that to somebody's attention, right? Like, if I had that girlfriend, if I sat my high maintenance girlfriend down and I said to her, "Babe, you're too high maintenance for me. Like, all of these other women that I know, nobody is as high maintenance as you." Like, what's the point? What's the intention? What's the motivation for somebody saying that? And honestly, you could just sit down your high maintenance girlfriend and say, "Hey, you're too high maintenance for me." We're in the Reddit thread called Ask Men. Okay, we need to get out of here. The next few, like, she's never happy, mentally exhausting. Yeah, I'll tell you it's mentally exhausting. If I had read that was called Ask Men, I would have got out of there. No, yeah, actually, it's important that we get all kinds of perspectives here. Maybe I'll provide the queer perspective here. That's good. I feel uniquely positioned to provide the queer perspective. So now that we've asked the men, we're going to ask the women. Okay, so next up, we're going to talk about this blog post published by The Beauty Hub, and it is called "Why Being a High Maintenance Person," well, it says girl, and it reads, "Why Being a High Maintenance Girl is a Green Flag." So it says, the phrase high maintenance is often used as an insult, as we've discussed in the Ask Men Reddit thread, yikes, but it can be a positive trait. Let's find out the qualities that make being a high maintenance person a green flag. Everyone has green flags they'd like to see in a partner. Some are basic by modern dating standards, like being respectful and a good texter. However, most people aren't likely to put high maintenance on their list for several reasons. The label implies a person, often a woman, who is demanding, self-absorbed, and overbearing. The high maintenance girl is usually portrayed as a shopaholic or a mean queen bee. She's motivated by two things: expensive stuff and compliments. And you'll never catch her barefaced. All of these stereotypes are dubious at best and sexist at worst. Ooh, yes, this is well written. I love this. Despite the slander, wanting the very best for yourself is an admirable quality. Let's talk about why you should embrace your high maintenance habits. The idea that everyone must find their other half, quote unquote, to be fulfilled is misguided and strikes as codependent, which you are not. This is it right there, right? This idea of codependency and attachment styles, right? if you're gleaning all of your personal confidence and self-esteem from people outside of yourself, right? That extrinsic validation that you get from other people in order to feel good about yourself, then I don't think that's a healthy thing. That, like they say here, is strikes as codependent, which is sometimes completely unrelated to this idea of being a high maintenance person. You can be a low maintenance person and have an attachment style that isn't healthy. Ooh, and it brings about this idea of when you're in a relationship, you're in it because you want to, not because you want someone to cling to. But then even bring it back a little bit farther, right? Because a lot of times, like, you know that person. You have these people in your lives that are in relationships, and you look at them and you wonder, why? Like, why are you in this relationship? And it's something that's not even always lost on that person in the relationship as well. Like, they're aware that they're not enjoying it. They're aware that it's not good for their mental health. They're aware of X, Y, and Z. But because of this unhealthy attachment style, that can be helped if you go to therapy. But it also might be because they're codependent on somebody else in order to feel happy moving about the world. And I don't think it's a bad thing to want a partner to navigate life with. I don't think that's a bad thing. But it's maybe your motivations or your reasons as to why you want a partner. Like, you really have to do that deep self-introspection in order to figure out, maybe with the help of a therapist, to figure out whether your motivations for being in a relationship are healthy or not. And I think if you're in a healthy relationship, if you have collected enough information about a human being, it doesn't really matter if they're a high maintenance person or not, if they are doing it responsibly and ethically. I think a big part of this conversation about being a high maintenance person is this idea of self-care, right? And having a high amount of confidence for yourself. Because when it comes down to it, what are you actually maintaining? That's kind of the difference with that Reddit thread from before, right? Are you maintaining this false image of, like, I have money and fancy nice things and drive luxury cars and have fancy dinners and that? Like, maybe if you are maintaining an authentic image of your life, then I think being high maintenance in that sense would be a negative thing. But if you think about it on a personal level, like, is me, like, being high maintenance, like doing your makeup all the time and having nice hair and doing your nails and going for massages and chiropractic care and not psychotherapy, Jesus. What is it exactly that you're maintaining? So if you're unsure about the idea of you being high maintenance as a positive or negative thing, think about, what are you maintaining? Are you maintaining this fake social image in order to garner an amount of social equity, which means like an amount of respect or an amount of attention that you garner from the social zeitgeist, right? Because I think if you're doing that in an authentic way, that's not necessarily bad. But if you're constructing some sort of falsified presence out in the world through this idea of high maintenance, then that's not necessarily a positive thing. If you're somebody who likes those nicer things, if you're willing to take the time in order to participate in self-care and things like that, it does reflect the amount of respect you have for yourself. So this article here says, picky and fussy? No, you're just selective. The big difference is that you don't impose unrealistic expectations on others. Above all, you've discovered what matters to you and what doesn't. Those who can't appreciate your standards or are offended by them can kindly scoot to the left. And isn't that it right there? Again, it's not high maintenance isn't a bad thing if you're the one maintaining it. The reason that I got really interested in this topic is a moment that happened for me in real life a few weeks ago. I was out at a show performing in drag, and I showed up with, my bag because, I have purse, and it had, like my hairspray and this and that. I had 3 beverages. I had an iced coffee, I had a water, and I had an energy drink. And another drag performer made a comment of like, girl, you got all the beverages over there. And I laughed and I said, yeah, I just hate not having what I want. And it kind of just like, I heard myself say it and I was like, wow, I wonder if that sounds like entitled. You know what I mean? And like, I think it would be entitled if I walked into that establishment expecting the venue to get me an iced coffee, to get me a water, and to get me an energy drink. I think that would be an unrealistic expectation to place on somebody else. But the fact of the matter is, bestie, I paid for that energy drink. I made that iced coffee and I poured that ice water into my blender bottle, shoved it all in my purse, and brought it with me because I wanted everything that I wanted. I need 3 beverages. Like, this idea of being high maintenance isn't a bad thing. I don't think it's a bad thing. If I want to spend an hour painting my nails and filing them just right so they all match and they all have the same almond shape, and I paint them, and then you do the clear coat, and then you do the color, and then I do a matte coat because I really love a matte coat. It indicates the amount of respect that you have for yourself. Are you willing to take care of yourself? Because if that's considered high maintenance, then sign me up for the high maintenance club. I am an exceedingly, spoiler alert, high maintenance person. I am a very high maintenance person, but who's maintaining that? It's me. I'm the one out here doing all these things. I'm putting in the time. I'm out there in those streets maintaining myself. And I think that's a great thing because, like, I have a passion for success. I am an outgoing go-getter, if you will. And that takes a high amount of maintenance in order to make sustainable. Because we've been talking about this idea of maintenance as like this physical thing. But I think an interesting part of this conversation that is really missing from a lot of this online content that I've been looking through is, are you maintaining like your inside? And not in like a physical health way, like your heart health, which is also good, right? But like even think, now I'm going on a tangent, but like even think going to the gym and like people who are regularly weightlifting in that, like that's a high maintenance lifestyle. Going to the gym, eating your macros, getting that protein, eating plain chicken and rice. No, that's not, I'm not slandering the gym bros. I go to the gym a lot. I enjoy that. Well, not lately. Anyway, it doesn't matter. That is a high maintenance lifestyle. Somebody who smokes cigarettes, that's a high maintenance lifestyle. You're always maintaining this nicotine fix within your body, right? Like it's what you do on a day-to-day basis in order to maintain your sense of human experience. So if you look at it from such a basic standard level of everything that you do in your human life, aren't we all high maintenance? Like going out to work, isn't that a level of maintenance for your life? Right? If you're working to earn money so you can have a home, so you can buy the food, like ultimately at the end of the day, just living requires so much maintenance. Does it not? You go out grocery shopping and girl, I shop at Costco and schlepping those bags. Like I park pretty close to the elevator and my door isn't far from the elevator, but that schlepping those rainbow bags, it must be 100 pounds in each arm. It's always the liquid, the iced coffee, the Red Bulls, that all gets me. It's all very heavy. But even that in itself, right? Like I sit down to make nachos. Good Lord, that's a high maintenance meal, right? You gotta, because I like to make rainbow nachos where you have like one color of everything. So I gotta wash the spinach. I gotta cut the peppers and the tomatoes and the onions and I swear there were more things. Green onions. Yeah, like everything takes so much maintenance. And I think shaming people for engaging in maintaining their sense of self is a really negative thing. I think there is a misogynistic tone to a lot of this conversation as well, in the terms of like, you're high maintenance if you are engaging in femininity, right? Like this idea of like, you're going to get your hair done and your nails did and all of these things. That I think is inherently misogynistic because you can look at anybody's lifestyle and find something that would allude to the idea that they are also a high maintenance person. In the terms that we've been discussing here, this idea of being high maintenance in a good, positive sense is an act of self-kindness as well. You are taking the time to engage in self-care. You are being kind to yourself, which in turn will give you a higher sense of confidence and what I believe to be living a happier life. Honestly, I do. So in my dismantling hate videos, I've been looking lately at misogyny. And whenever I look at something, it's just when I look at homophobia, like the homophobes come out of the woodwork to comment on my profiles and whatever, to disagree with me is their natural born human given right. So I can understand that. Within the last 48 hours, I've released 2 videos of dismantling hate on my YouTube channel, ding, that are about misogyny. And these misogynists are climbing out of their basements to like argue and engage in what they think is an intelligent conversation, which I mean, I guess intelligence is somewhat subjective, but honestly, these ideas of like people hating women and hating femininity, like I don't understand it. I don't understand it. Okay, the reason that I'm talking about this is because I clicked on a page published by somebody of the name Don McMinn. And it looks like this blog entry was from March of 2017. And the title reads, "Don't be high maintenance or tolerate those who are." Here's the first line. "She's the bride at every wedding and the corpse at every funeral." I think that's going to be the name of my autobiography. And it reads, "High maintenance people wear me out. I've decided that I'm not going to be a spectator or a victim of their behavior. Join me in resisting, demanding, overly needy, selfish people. Don't feel obligated to tolerate their behavior or cater to their whims." So the way that he's presenting this here is this idea of like being manipulative to somebody else or by using people, which I don't think is a good thing. But I also don't think that this is that same idea of being high maintenance. Like, there's so many bullet points here. Jesus. Excessive and insatiable emotional needs. Extremely picky and hard to please. Negative. Unhappy. Melodramatic. Unorganized. Somebody who holds grudges. Self-centered and absorbed. Lack of self-awareness. All of these things are negative. Are all of this excessively picky, extremely picky? But all of these things that they mentioned here, I don't think that has anything to do with being high maintenance. I think we're conflating this idea of what being high maintenance is. And while we're on this topic of misogyny here, is that I think a lot of feminized people feel this pressure not to be a high maintenance person. You know, like that romanticized version of a woman or feminized person that's like so easygoing and, oh, I'm cool with everything and it's all good. And essentially somebody who has no boundaries in order to be manipulated by somebody. I think we live in a culture right now that is very divisive, and people who think that being high maintenance in terms of having a backbone. Like, is being high maintenance, does that mean that that person has a strong backbone? And is that why it's looked down upon by some of these people? Is this idea of high maintenance synonymous with the phrase harder to manipulate? Because I think that's part of this too. This like easygoing girl that's just cool with anything. Like you can have a cool, calm, and collected, like open, not picky at all personality, but still be a high maintenance person, because it all depends when that maintenance is taking place, right? Like it's not a spoiler at this point, but I'm such a high maintenance person, but I also do that maintenance in a preventative sense before that maintenance becomes required. You know what I mean? Like in my calendar, I have days where I go around my apartment and I maintain all the things that need to be maintained, right? So my examples here would be like filling up the soap dispensers, taking out the garbage, cleaning out the fridge, right? A lot of these things that we do in our lives require maintenance, right? Physical maintenance on our bodies, mental maintenance on our brains. Some of these things are straight up required by us in the human experience, right? Even something as simple as drinking water. Drinking water is a level of maintenance that we must engage in order to live as a human being. In the same way that filling up the soap dispenser is, taking out the garbage is. So are you going to engage in that maintenance behavior before it becomes absolutely necessary? So what I'm going for here is that I fill up the soap dispenser before it's empty. I clock it usually when it's about at like 40% full, and then I'm like, okay, pin that. That's going to have to be done here soon, because I hate running out of soap. In the same way that I hate having a garbage that's overflowing, right? I hate feeling so thirsty that I'm just completely dry. I engage in this level of maintenance behavior before it becomes absolutely necessary, because it's such a more enjoyable task to do before it's completely necessary. So I might be seen as somebody who's high maintenance, but honestly, that maintenance needs to be done at some point. I prefer to engage in that maintenance behavior before it becomes absolutely necessary, and you're potentially left with a fewer amount of options, right? Like if I notice that the soap dispenser is empty before it's all the way empty, I might notice that my big jug under the sink is empty too. So the next time that I'm out, I'm going to pick up a 4-gallon bottle of it at Costco. Again, everything's so friggin' heavy from Costco. Because then that leaves me with more options in order to maintain my life, right? If I completely run out of soap and now it's 8 p.m. and Costco's closed, like I'm going to have to run down to the little corner store and probably pay the same amount of money at that corner store for a little bottle of hand soap that's been sitting there since 2014 than I would the 4-gallon jug at Costco. That's going to last me so much longer. You know what I mean? Like a lot of this behavior is necessary for the human experience, but are you going to engage in it before it's that last moment? You know, so you being a high maintenance person for an amount of time might lead you to a lower maintenance lifestyle. I think about it in terms of like my drag closet and the way that I organize, not even just that, but like I think about it in terms of like the way that I organize everything in my life. So I have about 30 pairs of press-on nails that I wear in drag, right? And if I go and look at the bucket that I have all of those nails in, each set of nails is individually ziplocked. And within each Ziploc, along with the nails, is those little sticky pads that you use to stick them onto your nails. They're also organized in terms of the color wheel. Very high maintenance, right? Like it took me an amount of time to organize all of that and to maintain that. However, when I am packing my suitcase in order to go do a gig in drag, it takes me so much less time to pull out the exact set of nails that I know I need, because I know I want the red ones, so I know they're in the beginning, and I know that there's a set of sticky pads in there, so I don't have to root around and find that other thing and find that other piece, or like dig out from a huge pile of nails. Or imagine that all my nails were just like in a bucket and there were no Ziplocs, and I would have to sit there and individually pull out each single one that I wanted and then go get a Ziploc in that. It's like when you choose to engage in that maintenance behavior, I think, is something that's not always seen here. Because are you doing something in a preventative way? Like me sitting down in front of my favorite YouTuber organizing my nail bin is a lot more enjoyable than it's 30 minutes before I need to leave and I'm digging out all of my nails from this never-ending bucket of acrylics, you know? So figuring out when it's easiest to be high maintenance is a part of this conversation as well, because sometimes it's not necessarily appropriate to be high maintenance given the time constraints that you have, right? Like if it's 2 minutes before I need to leave and I need to dig out 10 matching nails from a box of 800, it's not really appropriate for me to be doing that in that moment, because then I'm going to be late. And then do I want to be late because of the nails and this? Like, this is obviously an example that I'm speaking about, but everything in your life is like this, right? Like eating healthy is something that requires maintenance. So are you going to eat poorly until you start having health issues and then you make the choice to maintain yourself through healthy eating? Maintain yourself before it's necessary. And it's not always that easy. I understand there are so many limitations, mental, physical, privilege, external, otherwise, that prevent us from engaging in this maintenance behavior before it's absolutely necessary. And I use this example of like my acrylic nails is something that's just silly and that I'm thinking about right now. But there are things in my life that I chose not to maintain. And then it gets past that level and now we have to. Now we have to do this right now. It's like the homework thing, right? It's the procrastination conversation here. Are you going to do something while the stakes are still low, right? The essay's due in 2 weeks. Am I going to write a paragraph every day, or am I going to cram it all in the night before? One of them gets you a better outcome, I believe. Ultimately, I think your level of maintenance needs to be authentic. If you're trying to maintain yourself to a standard that doesn't feel authentic to you, I think that's actually inherently a lot more high maintenance than it would be for somebody who just authentically wants to engage in that behavior, right? I love organization. Ooh, you hear that? The sweet, sweet sound of organization. I love organizing things. I love color coding things. I love organizing things. So I like engaging in that maintenance behavior because I find it interesting and satisfying and all the things, right? But if I didn't care about that, then it wouldn't make sense for me to do it. Then that would be pointlessly high maintenance. But because I enjoy engaging in that behavior, right? Like if you're trying so hard to be like the cool girl who doesn't care about anything, like, oh yeah, I'm good with whatever, and you're not that person, that is going to require so much maintenance than it is if you just showed your true personality. And also, if you're garnering relationships in your life while you're putting on some sort of inauthentic expression, now all of these relationships are going to expect you to remain in that same kind of characterization because that's what they met you as. So the way that you present yourself in your life on a daily basis, regarding a high maintenance or not, is going to inform the kind of relationships that you foster with people. So then you can really turn around, and it's not necessarily that you have fake friends, but maybe you were the fake one. You're the fake friend, you know? So next up, we're going to look at this blog post by Irene Fair, and it reads, "Living in fear of being high maintenance." I think a lot of people have this fear, and I think it has misogynistic roots because this idea of being a high maintenance woman, a high maintenance female, if you will, is rooted in misogyny and is harnessed in order to control the authentic expression of femininity, which is problematic. So this blog post reads, "One of the most damaging and destructive beliefs or fears I have ever had was that I am high maintenance. I lived in fear of asking too much, of wanting too much, in fear of being judged as selfish and needy. Over and over, I prided myself on being low maintenance. I took care of things myself. I never asked for help. I learned to be modest and never asking for what I really wanted. There were 2 places where this manifested, in my romantic relationships and at work, and the effect was the same. I thought back to my past relationships. I rarely asked or said anything that would hurt their feelings, inconvenience, or overwhelm them. I learned to hold back desires, what I wanted to do, and where to go. I toned down desires, calculating what a low-maintenance girl would want." Oh, and that calculation is so high maintenance as well, like we talked about before. Wow. "Most of all, I feared them leaving for the low-maintenance girl, the it girl that was easygoing, put together, stable, and most of all, undemanding. The most damaging place where I learned to hold back was restraining my emotions and adhering to the stoic, masculine model of pushing through emotional challenges. I strived to be calm and normal. I held back what was really happening inside. Every time I said, 'I'm fine,' I closed the door on a fire that burned. Every time I didn't ask for a hug when I needed it, I cut blood flow to my emotions and watched a part of me wither away and die like a limb from a tree. Every time I didn't ask to slow down when my body said it wanted to, I denied myself the attention I really needed. Every time I didn't ask for quality attention, I dreaded a piece of my sexuality, my womanhood, my femininity. With every neglect of what I needed in the name of being low maintenance, I developed resentment. The part of me that needed hearing was being silenced. The part that needed to be held was abandoned. My light was dimming, and I was the last one to know. This is really heartbreaking, and I don't think that this is a unique experience either, because I think a lot of people fear this idea of being a high maintenance person because of their perceptions from people that are in their lives. And your love relationships play a huge part of whether you see yourself or feel comfortable, rather, to express yourself as a high maintenance person. At the end of the day, I think everybody is a high maintenance person. Like I said before, just simply living and existing in the world is a high maintenance endeavor. Don't hide it. This deep cycle of holding back and resenting, retreating back further and then resenting more, kept playing itself out in every relationship, and relationships at work were no different. I resented the men because the desires were still there. I resented them even though I know it was myself who did not express my truth. I was who I held back. It was I who believed that my needs and desires were not worth the attention. I had retreated from my own responsibility to express my desires and ask for what I needed. Is high maintenance the same as advocating for yourself? I think there's an amount of crossover there. I watched my relationships fail from the sidelines, helplessly in resentment. It is from this place that hell broke loose. I created drama to get attention because isn't that it? Isn't that it right there? All behavior is communication. And a lot of times, if people don't get attention in a good and positive way, they'll create ways that they can get negative attention. It's something that we see over and over, not only in like literature, but in educational settings as well. Eventually, I burst out in anger and blame when my needs were not being met. I shut down and withdrew in hopes that someone would come rescue me. Paradoxically, I had become the woman I'd feared I'd be, the high maintenance bitch. Eventually, I buckled at the knees in resignation and began the slow descent into invisibility and reclusion. Along the way, this behavior came an unconscious habit. I had learned to be helpless. It had become a way of life. Every time we compromise and hold back, keep silent, and do not ask for what we want and what we need, we cut blood flow to what was essentially us, our emotions, and our desires. This is a quote from the Da Vinci Code, which is kind of random, and it says, "Men go to far greater lengths to avoid what they fear than to obtain what they desire." I don't like the sweeping generalizations of men and women, but I think if we look at this in a stereotypical way of maybe masculine versus feminine energy, because I think a lot of women would share this experience as well. Like, are you living your life in a way that is avoiding of what you don't want, or in pursuit of what you do want? That's a really deep one. That's a deep one right there. I want you to think about that. The things that you're doing in your life, is it out of fear or is it out of desire? Wow. Women know this type of sacrifice really well. It's in our culture. It's in the fiber of everyday language and thought. But we have no one to blame. It is us who teach men to look for women who are low maintenance. We hold back lest he'd think we are high maintenance. And the worst part is that women tear each other down for asking for what we want, vying for the low maintenance status as if it were some prize. I commonly hear, "She is so high maintenance, I don't know what he sees in her," used to criticize and demonize women who have the confidence to know and ask for what they want. Again, I don't think this is exclusive to men and women. I think anybody can fall into these categories, but it's definitely a situation that we see time and time again. I see this example personified in a lot of my experiences in life, not only in myself, but in other people around me. So let me know in the comments if you see that as well. Are there people in your life that fall into this category? It's time to take responsibility for our own part, because every time we hold back, we've reinforced the stereotype that we are high maintenance and not worth the attention that we need. We reinforce the norm that we should not take up space. It's time to create a new movement where we take responsibility for taking up space and being a feminine person, and where we teach people how to meet us where we are. It's not going to be easy. We live in a culture, a global culture, where the marker of success is a masculine one. Damn, that's good. Where powering through emotions is the standard and feelings are just obstacles in getting to the goal. Oh, what's her name? I need to say her name. Irene. Irene is getting us right here together, girl. I love Irene. Let's read that again. We live in a global culture where the marker of success is a masculine one, where powering through emotions is the standard and feelings are just obstacles in getting to the goal. This strategy worked well when women had no space in decision making in society. Thanks to the feminist movement of our mother's generation, we got a seat at the table. They fought against men using their own tricks with force and rational thinking, and they've come a long way. Yet, something was lost in the process. This is really interesting. This is all framed in the dichotomy of gender, which I don't adhere to, but for the purposes of this, I'm going to try and read it as it's written. Women learned to be men to succeed in this world. We matched men at being masculine. Thinking in a linear way, tapering down emotions, toning down our passion, we lost our ability to connect and work collectively. We lost the power of seeing multidimensionally. We lost our connection to feelings. We lost the ability to communicate heart to heart instead of bottom line. We lost love. I hate this kind of idea that people say that women are more emotional than men. And I would have to argue the opposite, because if you look in the comment section of any of my dismantling misogyny videos on YouTube, it's all of these men up in a rage and anger. Like, anger's an emotion too. Anger is an emotion too. So I think a lot of men are overly emotional, and it's not that they're crying at the bar, it's that they're screaming at me at the bar. Anyway, it's actually not. I had a friend call some really basic looking guy Morgan Wallen at a club the other night, and he just started yelling right away. It was really funny. I don't know who Morgan Wallen is, but he definitely looked like him, I'll tell you that. It's just the plaid. It's just the plaid and the mullet. Anyway, along the way, men and women alike confused femininity with the high maintenance of the sort when women manipulate and control. There it is. We've talked about that. It's so beautiful to read that in a nice, succinct sentence. Being high maintenance is not femininity. Because, again, a lot of men lead masculine high maintenance lifestyles. We feared losing the one because he could be scared off by the controlling bitch. We choose to lie to him and diminish our desires, our life force, and our birthright in fear of losing him. Our culture calls it compromise, but I call it self-sacrifice. We grow up with this cultural belief that attention is selfish, that asking for attention from others means intruding or bothering them. Essentially, we've adopted a position that we are not worthy of attention. It's time to change that. We are now in a different place, because the opposite of being a high maintenance person is asking for what you want and how you want it and owning your desire. Because the opposite of being a high maintenance person is knowing what you want and asking for it when you want it. You have to own your desire, because your desire is the most meaningful when you feel it. You gotta let it out, bestie. You gotta let it out. My plea to you is take up space and learn to ask for what you want. Be as emotional as you need to, and ask your partner to hold you where you are, whether it's an ecstatic laughter or a cathartic cry. Do not apologize for being not one way or another. Just be. That's good. Irene Fair, that's a great resource here. That was written back July in 2013. I wonder what Irene thinks now. I'd be fascinated to see what Irene thinks now as our culture is a little bit different. Okay, babies, we have one last thing to talk about here. A lot of this conversation has been focused around women and femininity. Now, like I've mentioned a few times here, this idea of high maintenance is not exclusive to women or femininity. I'm sure you know a lot of men in your lives who live high maintenance lifestyles, and I'm sure you know that a lot of women in your life who enjoy low maintenance lifestyles. It's just honestly, like we read in that last post, do not apologize for who you are. Just simply be that. Okay, babies, we got one last thing to talk about, and it is all of the reasons that being a high maintenance person is a good thing. We've kind of sprinkled throughout this podcast episode the reasons that I think being a high maintenance person is a good thing, but let's all wrap it up together in a nice little bow before I leave you here for this week's episode. Being a high maintenance person, it shows that you care about yourself. If you don't have standards, it says a lot about you, mainly that you don't really love yourself. If you have high standards, that translates into a positive trait. If you're a high maintenance person, you probably know exactly what you want. You know exactly what you are looking for in a partner, in a job, and you don't back down to get it. There's so many people out here in the world that are indecisive, that don't know what they want. They don't know what they want in a partner. They don't know what to do for work, and that's completely valid and fine. But if you are a person who knows and has all of those answers, go and get them. Do not be afraid of people perceiving you as high maintenance, because if they're calling you high maintenance, they're probably repressing a whole lot of emotions that we talked about already in this episode that does not contribute to an overall happy experience as a human being on this planet, honestly. If you are a high maintenance person, you probably have very high standards. And if you have high standards, you will probably recognize and respect the high standards and boundaries of other people, which will lead, in most cases, to stronger and more fulfilling relationships. A lot of people will respect you more if you are able to advocate for yourself. And again, I don't do all of these things. I don't do all these things. I'm not the omnipotent leader who has all the information and acts right all the time. A lot of these things I'm still working on as well, because I am a product of the culture that I grew up in the same way that you are listening to this right now. So don't take this as like I'm shaming you into doing something different than you are, because I don't like to perpetuate the shame model in order to motivate people. I don't think it works. But at the end of the day, I think it's a good thing that we're starting these conversations, and I'm attempting to help myself here just as much as I'm attempting to help you, the listener, in this episode. So remember that. If you are a person who is high maintenance in the positive ways that we've discussed in this episode, you are probably somebody who works pretty hard. And a hard worker is something that should be respected. And you should feel proud of yourself if you are a high maintenance person and you are also taking the time to maintain yourself, because that is a large amount of work. And good for you for taking care of yourself and putting yourself first and working through all of those hard things in order to even just have the privilege of being high maintenance. There are so many people in the world right now who do not have the privilege of being high maintenance. And that's a really sad fact for a multitude of reasons, because of genocide, because of war, because of famine, because of monetary issues, because of race, because of religion, sexuality, gender orientation. There are so many reasons as to why people cannot afford to be a high maintenance person. So if you are listening to this, God damn it, I want you to feel proud of it right now. And I want you to utilize that and potentially leverage your voice to help the people around you, not only in your communities, but people around the world who do not have the voice and the autonomy in order to be a high maintenance person, because everybody deserves that. But anyway, babes, to end this off, if you are a high maintenance person, if you're a low maintenance person, I want you to feel proud of who you are, as long as it is not infringing on the positive life experience of those around you. If you are high maintenance in the terms of you need lots of money and you need fancy things and you put the responsibility of fulfilling those high maintenance needs onto other people, I don't think that's right. I don't think you should be manipulating and using other people to maintain your sense to your high maintenance lifestyle. Honestly, at the end of the day, if you are high maintenance, you need to be the person who is maintaining it. You need to ask for what you want in all situations, in your personal life, in your professional life, in your romantic life. Do not be afraid to advocate for yourself and what you want and what you need. Again, as long as it's not infringing on anybody else's positive life experience out here in the world. I think being high maintenance is a beautiful thing. And if you're a high maintenance person, let me know in the comments, besties. So thank you so much for watching this episode of Dtalk here on my YouTube channel or Spotify if you're listening. If you're watching on YouTube, consider subscribing. If you are listening on Spotify, consider leaving me a review. It all helps to support my work, and I appreciate you so much for doing that. I'm gonna go take all of this purple off of my face, and if that doesn't say high maintenance, I don't know what is. So thank you again for watching this episode of Dtalk. I will see you next week, and until then, goodbye.